So let us go to a further generalization of the 8-array or M-array PSK scheme that we have formulated in the earlier diagram. And before we proceed further, let us first uh, uh, recap or encapsulate the overall block diagram of this generalized modulation schemes. The way the diagram looks like is as follows. Um, there is some sequence of bits that are coming at the input to the modulator, and this is a time domain sequence. So one bit is after the next, and so on. The modulator takes that sequential serial bit stream and it converts it into a parallel bit stream. And there are total of small k such parallel branches where 2 to the power k becomes the m, the order of the modulation scheme. And then using those k bits, uh, one of m symbols is selected by the bits to symbol mapper. And that symbol for the schemes of modulation that we are considering is a two-dimensional vector. It has an in-phase component Si and it has a quadrature component Sq. And so the diagram that we were just describing looks like this. There is a sequential stream of bits that is coming in to the modulator. There is this serial to parallel conversion which takes small k bits at a time, x0, x1 up to x of k minus 1, and you get a parallel stream of bits. And then there is a bits to symbol mapper which takes this k bits and converts it into one symbol vector, which is given by SISQ. Okay, let's see how this diagram would look like for BPSK or for on-off keying or even binary phase shift keying. For all such schemes, m is equal to 2, which means this small k is equal to 1. When small k is equal to 1, serial to parallel block is trivial. There is no parallelization going on. You take one bit at a time. Because small k is 1, you just have x0 here. Xk minus 1 is same as x0. So there is only one line here. And that gets mapped to a symbol point in the constellation diagram. For QPSK, m is equal to 4, small k is equal to 2, and now you have two parallel branches, x0, x1. And using that, this block here picks one of the 4 symbols. For 8-array PSK, m is equal to 8, and so now there are 3 such parallel branches, and you get a particular symbol out of the 8 symbols through this particular diagram, block diagram. So this is, for example, a mapping of QPSK. M is equal to 4, K is equal to 2. These are the 4 constellation points. And the bit block here, x0, x1, xk minus 1 is just 2 bits at a time. And bit sequence 1, 1 will get mapped to this symbol. Bit sequence 0, 1 will get mapped to this symbol, and so on. So this would be an example scheme for QPSK. We have already seen this earlier. This is for 8 PSK, and this labeling here shows which of the 8 possible bit sequences that can happen here, over here, get mapped to which symbol out of these 8 symbols. After 8 PSK, let us consider something called 16-array APSK, where APSK stands for amplitude and phase shift keying. Remember, this 16-array APSK, remember PSK has only one circle. The amplitude is not getting modulated, amplitude is remaining constant, only the phase is getting changed or modulated. For 16 array APSK, or in general APSK, both amplitude and phase are getting changed as you go from one symbol to the other. And so now here there are actually three circles, as you can see, and they form this type of constellation scheme. Now 16-ary APSK is sort of like 16-ary quadrature amplitude modulation, where if you take these four innermost symbols, they are on one circle, then all of these symbols are on the other circle, and there is another circle corresponding to the outermost four symbols. So in general, APSK and quadrature amplitude modulation, they are two different modulation schemes, but here they amount to being the same. In quadrature amplitude modulation, again amplitude and phase both are changing, going from one symbol to the next. And there can be even higher order modulation called 64 QAM, where M is 64, and therefore here there are 6 bits. This serial to parallel conversion takes 6 bits at a time and maps it to one of the 64 QAM symbols. So these are not the only possible schemes. There are many other schemes that are obviously possible. You can have 16-ary PSK or 32-ary PSK or even 64-ary PSK. Although if you have 64-ary PSK, there will be 64 such circles on the same, 64 such constellation points on the same circle, and it will seem very crowded. But it is possible, you can have such a scheme. And similarly, there will be 32-ary APSK or 32-ary QAM and so on. So there are many such modulation schemes that are possible. Now, what is one parameter that is going to be commonly referred, regardless of what modulation scheme is we are referring to? The parameter of our interest is going to be energy per symbol. How much energy we are transmitting for each symbol. And the reason why that is important is because that will determine the SNR, or ES over N naught, that, remember, we earlier said determines the performance of the modulation scheme. The Q function of square root of SNR is the theoretical expression for that we have seen earlier for BPSK. So energy per symbol is very much a critical parameter of the system design that we should fully understand how to calculate. Earlier on, when we drew such diagram for BPSK, we said that energy per symbol is always the squared length of the vector connecting a constellation point to the origin of the IQ plane. For BPSK, for QPSK, for 8PSK, even for M-ary PSK, regardless of the value of M, because all the symbols are located on a circle, energy per symbol is constant. And it's not a big deal to calculate what that energy is, you just need to square the radius. Whereas for 16 QAM, you will need to be a little more careful in calculating the energy per symbol. Actually, what you will see is that there are actually 3 types of symbols. The first type has this 4 innermost symbol, and their energy is 0.5 unit. If you take square of 0.5 x-axis, 0.5 y-axis, you get 0.5. Then there are 8 other symbols: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These 8 symbols again have the same energy, which is 2.5 units. You can do the math yourself. Look at these coordinates, and based on that you will be able to figure out the distance of each of these points. That distance is always going to be the same, equal to square root of 2.5. And then finally the third type of symbols is this 4 corner symbols, for which the energy is 4.5 units. So we are spending different energy for different symbols. In such a case, what matters is not the individual symbol energy, but how much energy we are spending on average across all the 16 symbols, and that value turns out to be 2.5 unit. Now remember, we said that in the performance determination, what matters is not really the absolute energy per symbol, rather it is the distance between the constellation points. And so in this case, you can see that the distances are all the same among the adjacent points. And that distance is going to be exactly equal to square root of this average symbol energy divided by 2.5. Okay, so that is the formula. Where is this coming from? Well, this distance between these 2 points, uh, if you take it as 1 unit, then we have already seen that energy per symbol is 2.5 units. And so if you work it backward, you will find that distance is square root of ES divided by 2.5. Okay, so as a function of ES, we have formulated the distance between the adjacent points of 16ary QAM. We will make use of this formula later on, so keep this formula in the mind. Distance is, or distance squared between the adjacent symbols is ES divided by 2.5. We have already noticed earlier that the decision regions of the maximum likelihood scheme, assuming equiprobable symbols, if all of the 16 symbols are transmitted with the same probability of 1 over 16, then the decision regions are always the perpendicular bisectors of the lines connecting adjacent points. And so if we draw such lines, we get such decision regions. And this makes a lot of intuitive sense. What is the part of this IQ plane which is closest to this particular symbol compared to all the others? It is obviously this square over here. And so this is the decision region for this symbol. So now to summarize, the received vector, the received symbol actually can be thought of as either a two-dimensional vector or a complex number, and that can take any value within the IQ plane. The task of the demodulator is to take any vector that can fall in the IQ plane and map it to the most likely transmitted symbol corresponding to that particular received vector. And to do so, we can think of the demodulator operation as based on decision region. If the received vector falls within the decision region of a particular transmitted symbol, then we say that that transmitted symbol, that particular symbol is the most likely symbol to have been transmitted. With that, we cannot be always correct. If the noise is small, then we are very likely to be correct. But at least our probability of symbol error will become the best it can be. It will get optimized. Now the demodulator can still make an error if the noise is so big that you transmit a particular symbol and the received vector falls outside of the decision region for that particular symbol. And the probability of error, as we have said earlier, depends on the distance between the two symbols and it also depends on the power spectral density n naught of the noise. Effectively, it's a function of the signal to noise ratio, or ES over n naught. Now we have done the probability of error evaluation for BPSK, and that very easily carries forward to on-off keying as well. How about the probability of error uh, theoretical analysis for 16 QAM? Uh, Now you will see that unlike BPSK or unlike OK, the noise, which is the random variable here, is not just one dimensional. The noise has two dimensions, Ni and Nq, in phase and quadrature. The method of evaluating the probability remains still the same, but the evaluation will now have to be performed by integrating the PDF over two dimensions. For example, if you are interested in the probability of correct decision, then we will need to consider the vector R, uh, specifically the conditional distribution of vector R given a particular transmitted symbol. That conditional PDF will be two-dimensional PDF. It is still going to be Gaussian PDF because we are assuming the noise to be Gaussian, but the distribution function will be two-dimensional. And we will have to integrate that two-dimensional PDF. For example, if we are considering the probability of correct decision when this symbol is transmitted, if we want to evaluate that probability, we will need to integrate this two-dimensional conditional PDF of R given this transmitted symbol. We will need to integrate it over this shaded region. Alternatively, we can say that if we want to evaluate the probability of symbol error, let us say that this symbol is transmitted and we want to know what is the probability that the receiver will make an error in detecting the symbol. The receiver will detect some symbol which is other than this symbol. That probability is going to be the conditional PDF of R given this transmitted symbol. But now we will have to evaluate that conditional PDF over a two-dimensional Gaussian distribution over the complement of the decision region for this symbol. So we'll need to evaluate that two-dimensional PDF over the entire IQ plane from -infinity to infinity, excluding this decision region. Okay, now that leads us to two questions. One is, what is this two-dimensional Gaussian PDF? We know what one-dimensional Gaussian PDF is, how it looks like, that we have seen in our lecture number 3 at the start of the semester. But what is two-dimensional Gaussian PDF? That we haven't considered yet, and we will not consider that in this course. It will become maybe a topic of your future subject on probability theory and stochastic systems. So we will not do that. Secondly, even if we somehow had a mathematical formulation of two-dimensional Gaussian PDF, this double integration is a nightmare. It may not be that bad for this square decision regions, but the decision regions may not be always square. It may be hexagonal, or it may be some other strange shape, depending on how the constellation points, these blue dots, are arranged. So the probability of error evaluation for higher order modulation, for complicated modulation schemes, becomes kind of challenging. It becomes an analytically difficult task. Sometimes it is not. For example, for BPSK, for QPSK, this analytical evaluation, at least if you knew the two-dimensional Gaussian PDF, is probably not a big deal. But in general, we want to get to a simpler answer, something that we can very easily evaluate. So there is actually one approach which is kind of simple, and it makes use of our earlier understanding that the probability that we will detect one symbol as some other symbol, that probability is dependent only on the distance between those two symbols other than the power spectral density of the noise. This is that formula that we have seen earlier. And we have also seen that for 16 QAM, the distance between the 2 points, at least the 2 adjacent points, is given as square root of ES divided by 2.5. And so if I take 2 adjacent points from any given transmitted symbol, I will get the probability that that symbol is mistaken for that other symbol. And that is nothing but Q function of square root of ES over 5 and naught. Now, what we are going to do is, we are going to evaluate this entire shaded region, the blue colored region, in a piecemeal manner, in a piecewise manner. Every time we evaluate this pairwise probability, we will be evaluating a chunk of that shaded region. So this is, for example, uh, this 16 QAM constellation, and let us assume that this uh, symbol colored in green over here is the one that is transmitted. What is the probability that this symbol gets mistaken as this red symbol? You already saw that here. It is ES over 5 and naught. Why is it ES over 5 and naught? Because the distance between those 2 points, these 2 points, is square root of ES divided by 2.5. And then we just apply this formula. And so the Q function of square root of ES over 5 and naught gives us the probability that this symbol is getting uh, detected as this erroneous symbol colored in red. And that probability is actually the integration of that two-dimensional function over this shaded blue stripe over here. Now you will see that this green symbol can alternatively be detected as this symbol, or this symbol. The distance between all of these pairs remains the same, square root of ES divided by 2.5. And so therefore our answer for the pairwise error probability, the analytical expression remains the same. And we have actually evaluated these 4 shaded stripes. We can go one step further and say that let us also evaluate the probability that this green symbol gets mistaken as the other 4 adjacent symbols which are on the corners, and you will see that the distance between the green and this red is square root of 2 ES divided by 2.5, and so the error probability becomes Q function of square root of 2 ES divided by 5 and naught. But that answer remains the same for all of this error probabilities. Now, definitely for sure, if I add all of this blue colored regions, what I'm going to get, the union of all of this blue colored region is going to be stronger. I mean, the error calculation that we do by adding all of these blue colored regions is going to be bigger than this blue colored region. In fact, by just adding this 4 blue stripes, I am already covering that blue colored region entirely. And in fact, I am covering it, some of it multiple times. So actually I just need to add this 4 Q functions, and I am guaranteed to get an overall probability of error which is less than that. But just if I want to be even more conservative, I can even add this 4 other Q functions, and I'll get the overall union bound. 4 times Q function of square root of ES over 5 and naught plus this 4 Q functions, which is square root of 2 times as mentioned. So you see that we took some theoretical evaluation which would have been quite complicated. We made it much simpler by this union bound approach, and we are now able to evaluate at least an upper bound. We know that the actual probability of error can never be bigger than this, because if I add all of these blue colored regions, the sum total, the union of all this blue colored region is greater than the other blue colored region that we saw 2 slides back. In fact, some parts of that blue colored region get counted multiple times in this theoretical expression. So this is kind of an upper bound. Our performance can never be worse than this. So I have actually done 3 different things. I ran Monte Carlo simulator for 16 com. Then I actually did an exact theoretical probability evaluation for 16 com that we are not going to consider in this course. And then the last thing I did was I plotted the union bound on top of it, and this is how it looks like. The blue dots are the simulation, the red is the exact theory, which we are not going to evaluate in this lecture, and this blue is the expression that was shown over here. You can see that this is an upper bound. Our actual performance is better than this. But as SNR becomes bigger and bigger, the difference between the shaded blue, the upper bound, union bound, and the red, the actual performance, becomes smaller. This bound is actually loose because you can see that there is a distance between the actual performance and the union bound. You can actually make it tighter by noticing that to get that earlier blue shaded region, to get this shaded region, we actually don't need this bottom row at all. The union of these 4 blue stripes will already give us that. So we can actually get rid of this second term over here. If we do that, then that upper bound will become even better than this blue line. Okay, so we will stop this right here, and then we will continue it in the next video.